I never thought I'd see our family's century-old farm sold off like a cheap roadside souvenir, but that's exactly what happened last spring. Standing in our weathered kitchen, watching my parents sign away 5 generations of history to the Highland Development Corporation, I felt physically sick. "Mom, Dad, please," I begged one last time, my hands gripping the worn edges of Grandpa Joe's old oak table. "This land has been in our family since 1923. You can't just sell it to become another soulless subdivision." Mom didn't even look up from the contract, her manicured nails flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. After her promotion to senior partner at her law firm last year, she'd stopped having time for anything that didn't come with a hefty price tag attached. "Sarah, honey," she sighed, using that condescending tone that made me feel like I was still 12 instead of 28. "It's just empty farmland. The crops barely break even anymore, and the development company is offering $3 million. Do you know what we could do with that kind of money?" Dad at least had the decency to look somewhat conflicted, his weathered farmer's hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Your mother's right, Princess. Times change. We're not farmers anymore. Haven't been since your grandfather passed." The memory of Grandpa Joe hit me like a physical blow. He passed away just 6 months ago, and already they were dismantling everything he'd built. Everything he loved. "He trusted you to protect this place," I said quietly, my voice trembling. His last words were about the farm. His last words were delirious ramblings about treasure and secrets. Mom cut in sharply. "Really, Sarah, I expected this kind of romantic nonsense when you were younger, but you're an agricultural scientist now. Be practical." That was rich, coming from her. Mom hadn't spent a single day working this land. She hadn't been there during the drought of 2015 when Grandpa Joe and I worked 18-hour days to save what crops we could. She hadn't helped us dig irrigation channels or repair fences or deliver calves in the middle of the night. She hadn't been there when Grandpa Joe would sit on the old porch swing every evening, telling stories about our ancestors who'd built this place from nothing. About great-great-grandfather William Montgomery, who'd first claimed this land, who'd chosen this specific plot for reasons he'd only ever share with his own son. "The land keeps its secrets," Grandpa Joe used to say, his eyes twinkling. "And one day, when the time is right, it'll share them with someone worthy." Mr. Davidson, the development company's representative, cleared his throat politely. "Mrs. Montgomery, if you could initial here and here." His eager voice snapped me back to the present. I watched in helpless fury as my parents signed away our heritage. 500 acres of prime Pennsylvania farmland, land that had sustained our family through the Great Depression, through wars and droughts and everything in between, reduced to nothing more than dollar signs in their eyes. 30 days, Mr. Davidson said smoothly, gathering up the contracts. "We'll begin preliminary surveys next week, but you'll have 30 days to vacate the property completely. The company is happy to provide moving services, of course." "That won't be necessary," Mom replied briskly. "We've already purchased a condo in Philadelphia. Sarah can handle clearing out the farmhouse. It'll give her time to adjust to the situation." I stared at her, blindsided. They'd already bought a condo. How long have they been planning this? "Of course," Dad added quickly, "you're welcome to come live with us, Princess. There's no need for you to stay at that little research facility. With your degrees, you could get a corporate job in the city." "I'm staying at the Agricultural Research Center." I cut him off. "My work on sustainable farming practices actually matters to people who care about the land." Mom's lips thinned with disapproval. "Still throwing away your potential on playing in the dirt. At least this sale means we won't have to watch good land go to waste on your experimental organic farming notions anymore." The casual cruelty of her words left me speechless. I'd spent the last 3 years implementing new farming techniques on our land, working with the research center to prove that traditional family farms could be both sustainable and profitable. The test plots had just started showing promising results. But none of that mattered now. Not to them. Mr. Davidson stood, offering his hand to my parents. "Congratulations on the sale. Highland Development will transform this property into the most exclusive residential community in the county. The Montgomery Farm Estates will keep the name, of course, to honor the heritage." I couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing my jacket, I stormed out of the kitchen and into the crisp spring morning. The farm stretched out before me, morning mist still clinging to the fields where the first green shoots of this year's crops were just beginning to emerge. Near the old barn, a pair of red-tailed hawks circled lazily, the same mating pair that had nested on our property for the past decade. Soon their hunting grounds would be covered in concrete and asphalt, their ancient oak tree cut down to make way for some millionaire's mansion. "Sarah, wait." Dad's voice called from behind me, but I kept walking, heading for the back fields where Grandpa Joe and I had spent so many hours working side by side. It was where he taught me everything he knew about farming, about respecting the land and its rhythms. The memories flooded back as I walked. I was 5 years old, sitting on his shoulders as he checked the irrigation lines. 10 years old, helping him mend fences and learning the property's boundaries. 15, driving the tractor for the first time, his patient voice guiding me through the gears. And just last year, 27 years old with a PhD in agricultural science, showing him the results of my organic farming trials. His eyes had lit up with pride as he'd examined the improved soil samples, the increased crop yields. "You see it, don't you?" He'd asked that day, his voice already weakened by the cancer that would take him just months later. "You understand what this land can do, what it can be?" I'd nodded, not realizing then that we were running out of time, that he was trying to tell me something important. A glint of metal caught my eye, pulling me from my memories. I was standing near the old stone wall that marked our property's southern boundary, and something was reflecting the morning sun. Bending down, I brushed aside some loose dirt to find a small brass key, old and green with age. My breath caught. I recognized it immediately. It was the key to Grandpa Joe's old study in the barn, the private space where he kept all his farm records and family documents, the room he'd specifically left to me in his will, though I hadn't been able to bring myself to go through it since his death. "The land keeps its secrets," his voice whispered in my memory, "until the time is right." Looking back toward the farmhouse, I could see the development company's sleek black SUV pulling away down our long gravel drive. My parents' car followed shortly after, heading toward their new city life without a backward glance. They'd given me 30 days to clear out generations of history, 30 days to say goodbye to everything I loved. But standing there with Grandpa Joe's key in my hand, watching the morning sun climb over fields that had sustained my family for 100 years, I felt something else stirring beneath my grief and anger. Hope. Grandpa Joe had never done anything without a reason. He'd never simply given up or taken the easy path. And in those final days, he tried to tell us something about the farm. Something my parents had dismissed as the ramblings of a dying man. But what if they were wrong? What if the land really did have secrets to share? And what if just maybe I had 30 days to discover them? The key felt warm in my palm as I closed my fingers around it, my decision made. I might not be able to stop the sale, but I could spend these last days uncovering whatever Grandpa Joe had wanted us to know. I owed him that much. I owed the land that much. Behind me, the hawks called out, their cries carrying across fields that had witnessed a century of Montgomery family history. Soon, those fields would be gone, transformed into another cookie-cutter luxury development. Unless Grandpa Joe had left behind something that could change everything. Something hidden in that old study, waiting for someone worthy to discover it. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a smile tugging at my lips. 30 days might just be enough time after all. Game on, Highland Development. Game on. The old barn study smelled exactly like I remembered. A mixture of leather, paper, and the special pipe tobacco Grandpa Joe used to smoke. Standing in the doorway, key still warm in my hand, I felt his presence all around me. The afternoon sun filtered through dusty windows, illuminating dancing motes in the air and casting long shadows across his massive oak desk. I hadn't been in here since before his passing. The room looked frozen in time, farming journals stacked neatly in one corner. His favorite leather chair still pulled away from the desk as if he'd just stepped out for a moment. A half-finished cup of coffee, long since dried up, sat next to a worn notebook. "Okay, Grandpa," I whispered, running my fingers along the desk's smooth surface. "What were you trying to tell us?" The study wasn't large, maybe 15 feet square, but every inch held purpose. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with agricultural references, family photo albums, and meticulously maintained farm records dating back decades. The 4th wall featured a large map of our property, yellowed with age but carefully preserved under glass. I started with the desk drawers, working methodically. The first two contained ordinary items, office supplies, more farming journals, equipment manuals. But the bottom drawer was locked. My hands trembled slightly as I tried the old brass key. It fit perfectly. Inside, I found a single leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. The inscription on the first page made my heart skip. Property of William Montgomery, 1923. My great-great-grandfather's journal. The man who first claimed this land. I carefully turned the pages, his elegant handwriting bringing the past to life. After months of searching, I finally found it. The geological surveys confirm what the old tales suggested. This land is unique. The mineral deposits alone would make a man wealthy, but that's not why I chose it. There are greater treasures here, things that must be protected. A sharp knock at the barn door made me jump. Through the study window, I could see a Highland development truck parked in our drive. Quickly tucking the journal into my bag, I headed downstairs. Two men in corporate polo shirts were waiting, looking impatient. Miss Montgomery? The taller one stepped forward. I'm Steve Randall, Chief Surveyor for Highland. We need to begin our preliminary work today. I straightened my spine, channeling Grandpa Joe's quiet strength. The contract gives us 30 days before you can start any development work. The contract gives you 30 days to vacate, he corrected smoothly. We can begin surveys immediately. We have permits. He held up an official-looking document. My mother's signature was clearly visible at the bottom. She must have signed additional paperwork without telling me. Fine, I said tightly, but stay away from the old barn. We're still clearing out personal property. Steve's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, we'll start with the back acreage. I watched them drive their equipment toward the fields, my mind racing. The journal in my bag felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. I needed time to understand what great-great-grandfather William had discovered, what Grandpa Joe had been protecting all these years. Back in the study, I pulled out my laptop and began documenting everything while continuing to read the journal. Hours slipped by as William's story unfolded. He'd spent years researching the specific plot of land before claiming it, following historical records and geological surveys. There were detailed maps, coordinates, and references to something hidden beneath the property. But what really caught my attention were the soil samples. The mineral composition is unlike anything I've seen, William wrote. Preliminary tests suggest rare earth elements in concentrations that shouldn't be possible in this region. But there's something else, something the tests can't explain. My hands froze over the keyboard. Rare earth elements, those were crucial for modern technology. Everything from smartphones to electric cars needed them. And they were becoming increasingly scarce. A memory surfaced. Last year's soil samples from my agricultural studies. I'd noticed some unusual readings but had been focused on organic farming applications. I hadn't thought to test for mineral content. The sound of heavy machinery startled me from my research. Looking out the window, I saw several excavators moving into position near the backfields. They weren't just surveying, they were preparing to dig. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Highland's board is meeting next week to finalize construction plans. Don't interfere with their work. This is happening whether you like it or not. I started to reply, then stopped as another memory hit me. Last Christmas, Grandpa Joe insisted we watch an old documentary about mining rights and mineral laws. At the time, I thought he was just being nostalgic. Now I wondered if he'd been trying to tell us something else. Opening a new browser tab, I began researching Pennsylvania property laws. 3 hours and several legal databases later, I sat back, my mind reeling from the implications of what I'd discovered. The original deed to our property, filed by William Montgomery in 1923, included something called mineral rights in perpetuity. These rights were specifically excluded from any future sale of the surface property, meaning they still belonged to the Montgomery family trust. If there really were valuable minerals under our land, Highland Development couldn't touch them without our permission. They couldn't even dig foundations without risking a lawsuit. But I needed proof. Hard scientific evidence of what lay beneath our fields. My hands shaking with excitement, I called Dr. Chen at the Agricultural Research Center. Sarah, she answered on the first ring. I heard about the farm. I'm so sorry. I need a favor, I said quickly. Remember those unusual soil samples from last year's study? Can we run a full mineral analysis? I mean everything. Rare earth elements, heavy metals, the works. That's expensive, she cautioned. And it'll take time. I have some grant money left, and I only need a few days. Please, Dr. Chen. This is important. She sighed. Bring them in tomorrow morning. I'll see what I can do. Next, I called Tom Harrison, my best friend from college who now worked as an environmental lawyer in Pittsburgh. I need you to look at some property documents, I said without preamble. Specifically mineral rights from the 1920s. How fast can you get here? I can come tomorrow, he said, concern evident in his voice. Sarah, what's going on? I think my great-great-grandfather left us something more valuable than just farmland. And I think Grandpa Joe spent his whole life protecting it. After hanging up, I returned to William's journal, reading well into the night. The more I read, the more convinced I became that he'd chosen this land for very specific reasons that could change everything. But Highland Development's machines were already here, their corporate machine rolling forward with the inevitability of a steamroller. I had days, maybe hours, before they started seriously excavating. I needed to buy time. The next morning, I was waiting when Steve Randall and his crew arrived. I'm invoking a temporary stop work order, I announced, holding up a stack of papers Tom had helped me prepare over the phone last night. Steve's face darkened. You can't do that. We have contracts. Check with your legal department, I said firmly. The mineral rights were excluded from the sale. Any excavation could be considered mining activity without proper permits. Your company could face significant fines. This is ridiculous, he snapped, but I noticed him pulling out his phone and stepping away to make a call. By that afternoon, the excavators were being moved off our land. I bought myself a few days, but I knew it was temporary. Highland Development hadn't built their empire by giving up easily. But as I watched their trucks drive away, I felt Grandpa Joe's presence beside me, almost as if he were still here, still protecting our land. I won't let you down, I whispered. I'll find what you were trying to tell us. I'll protect what's important. The hawks circled overhead, their cries carrying across fields that suddenly held more mystery than I'd ever imagined. Somewhere beneath that rich soil lay secrets that had been guarded for a century, secrets that might just save everything we held dear. And I had a feeling we were running out of time to uncover them.